Is DeAndre Hopkins about to become a member of the Baltimore Ravens? We talk about the updated situation with Hopkins, how likely it is that he becomes a member of the team. We also talk about Odell Beckham Jr. and his signing, how it impacts the Baltimore offense, Lamar Jackson and his contract situation, as well as draft talk and so much more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in here to another edition of Locked On Ravens here on Thursday, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host here, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, and we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here with us, making us your first listen here each and every day. We're free and available all podcasting platforms, including over on YouTube and video form. You can subscribe for free, both in video and audio form. But here with me today, a very special guest, a friend of the show. Really happy to have him back here, Ken McKusick of Film Study Ravens. And Ken, I'm excited to have you back on the show. It's been a crazy offseason. Lamar Jackson, Odell. How's it been? How's this whirlwind been for you?
Yeah, it's been fast. It's been a lot of things I did not think would be quite as difficult in terms of the Lamar Jackson signing. I've been very vocal about just how badly I think Jackson's been hurt by not having an agent, and the NFL PAs very, using Jackson as a sword and shield in this process has been very upsetting to me. So I didn't like that, and I really don't like the Odell Beckham signing. I really don't like it. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who want to see a wide receiver signed at any cost. They don't care, put it on the credit card. The people who do care are season ticket holders. Okay, we're going to have these tickets next year, the year after that, the year after that. We're not playing for one title. We want a playoff appearance every year. And so that's why we're, people like me are upset about this. And the Ravens are in a position where they may spend between $11.5 and $14.5 million of next year's cap on Odell Beckham for this year.
Right. And it's a good topic for our second segment. I'm really, getting to Odell, getting to Lamar, but another star wideout, Ken, seems to be the topic right now. Obviously the Odell signing, it happened 1 year up to $18 million, 15 guaranteed. So we'll talk about that in the second segment, but DeAndre Hopkins seems to be the hot name right now in terms of, could he be the addition? And I think obviously right now, the Ravens don't have a lot of cap space. Now that can change. They can restructure guys. They can extend Lamar. They can trade, whatever it may be. But Hopkins right now can about a $19 million base salary for 2023. Also has another year added on to that. And we've heard Pac-Man Jones, Darius Slay. There have been a lot of rumblings about maybe the potential of Hopkins coming to Baltimore. It seems like every day there's some other report. Michael Lombardi talked about it too, with either Odell or Hopkins, or Hodo and Hopkins. Do you feel like this is a likely scenario where the Ravens clear up that cap, bring DeAndre Hopkins in, or would you rather see it be, if they have one big move left, would it be Hopkins for you? Would you rather address another need?
I'd rather it be Lamar. I mean, that's just pure and simple. I want the money spent on Lamar and get that contract done and make it happen. I don't want it spent on another aging wide receiver. Now, Hopkins is a good player. He's a better player than Beckham. He has a better projection for this year, in my opinion, than Beckham. So if we had one move to make a wide receiver, I'd have gone for Hopkins. But now that they've spent all the money on Beckham, I don't see spending the money on Hopkins as well. He has been a very consistent player. He's at his low point, though, in terms of yards per reception. He's at almost his low point in his career in terms of yards per target. He'll be 31 this next season in terms of his football age. So this is a point at which you start to see significant decline from players, and it's very unusual to get players who are 30 and older and are going to surprise you to the positive. They can surprise you to the negative a lot of ways with injuries, and Hopkins has missed a lot of time the last 2 years after being an Iron Man for many years. But they generally are not going to surprise you in the positive in terms of production.
So for you, it is mostly the age. Is it any money? Is it draft capital? Or for you, is it purely Hopkins and his age?
It would be all of the above, because draft capital and cap dollars are the two things organizations have to spend to build their franchises. I wouldn't mind if it was a low round pick and the Cardinals were eating most of the salary and they were picking up somehow with that. I guess I wouldn't mind that kind of a pick, but using both cap dollars and draft capital on a player is just one of the huge no-nos of being a GM. It's a huge no-no. You don't do it. There are players you have to go out and pay market value for. This is, by the way, the reason why no one will take Lamar Jackson off our hands is because the 2 first-round draft picks is an enormous increment to the cost that the Ravens have to pay for it. So no one was willing to do that because of those 2 first-round draft. It really is not anything related to collusion. The nature of the thing creates so much friction, it's virtually impossible. And all you have to do is look back at the history of such franchise tag players and see how many have been signed from their original teams. I think it might be 1 in the history of the non-exclusive tender to know it's basically an insurmountable barrier to that being signed. And Lamar does not like it. Lamar's done a lot of things this offseason, I understand, that he's fully within his rights to do. But I think he would have done very well to have an agent and find the appropriate ground to make this to make a good judgment on his contract, rather than having the NFLPA whispering in his ear the whole time and basically telling him you need to get a fully guaranteed deal for a fully guaranteed deal because all these other quarterbacks are depending on you.
Right. And, I think with Lamar, we heard the Lombardi report come out about Hopkins and Odell. I mean, is that something, and obviously reports are reports, we don't know what's true and what's not. Only Lamar and the Ravens really know that, but it's pretty hard, I think, for Baltimore after giving the money to Odell, realistically, to then turn around and trade for Hopkins, give him that. I think the offense would be unstoppable. I mean, with Hopkins in that offense, you can't deny the player he is. Obviously, health, injuries, age, hopefully willing in that situation. But Ken, do you feel like teams like the Chiefs and the Bills, those are other teams that have been mentioned, if the Ravens weren't to get Hopkins and Hopkins goes over to one of those teams, I mean, what does it do for the landscape of the AFC if it's not Baltimore, but he goes to a rival?
I think you start worrying about that, you really are messing yourself up. In truth, most years it's down to injuries is who really makes a good postseason run. Last year, the Ravens had the perfect team put together to make a deep run. This team was good enough. They just did not have their starting quarterback. And frankly, that was the only difference between them and all of the other teams in the AFC who were at the very top. I don't think that you can really worry too much about who the other team has. Whatever they do, they're making choices to do it. If the move is not priced properly, whether it's draft capital or in terms of dollars of cap, then you stay away from it.
And you mentioned choices. Let's talk about your choices, because you said you would have rather Hopkins than Odell. And obviously the reports coming out about Cortland Sutton also, I think, throw another thing into this whole thing where it could have been Sutton. Seems like that was the number 1 choice for the Ravens, and then that fell apart based off the reports. If you had to kind of rank those 3 guys, Ken, in terms of what you would have liked to see Baltimore do, if they had one spot, and it was for one of those 3 guys, and you could rank them 1, 2, 3, what would that order be?
Well, Cortland Sutton is the young player. He's 27, so he's 28 this year. He's the obvious choice of the 3 to me, but there are considerations that go with that in terms of salary. And I don't know exactly where he is in terms of signing process, whether his thing is a rental. But if it was him for 1 year at the Beckham money, of course I'd take Sutton.
Right. And I think a lot of the conversation surrounding Beckham and even Hopkins has to do with age, games missed. Hopkins missed, games last year. Obviously the suspension was part of that, but with Hopkins in particular, Ken, is this a situation in Baltimore where if he were to come in, is it worth restructuring? Is it worth pushing that money down the line? Extending Lamar, obviously, that's what everybody wants. That would free up the most amount of money. You could lower that first year cap hit. But all the gymnastics maybe that you would have to go through to get a DeAndre Hopkins cap-wise, do you feel like for the player that would be worth it for Baltimore to bring him in?
It's all dependent on price. I mean, Kevin, it's all dependent on price. If you're talking about bringing him in and there's draft capital involved, hopefully it'd be almost nothing, because I think the Cardinals really try to get rid of that contract. And and I'm not sure why, because they have to eat a lot of dollars, but obviously in their planning it makes sense to do it now. But if the Ravens were to sign him, he's signed for 2 years. I'm not super excited about getting DeAndre Hopkins years 33 and beyond. 31, 32, sure, I'll take those. But I'm not really excited about getting 33, 34, and 35 out of DeAndre Hopkins. Extending him makes the cap a little bit more palatable. So there are some questions there. But if you really want to do that, you could do it with void years, I suppose. I absolutely hate the fact that the Ravens have gone to void years on their contract. They'd really never done it before. And it's a future spending, borrowing methodology that I just can't stand. There's just a lot of things about this offseason in terms of the Ravens cap position that have been highly compressed by the situation with Lamar Jackson, but spending money in void years, putting more on the credit card to pick up another wide receiver that honestly I don't think is enough. And you say the offense would be unstoppable. I don't really buy that. I think the offense would be very good with Lamar Jackson, Hopkins alone, and a good set of running backs, and maybe one new offensive lineman in the draft. But there are questions about the offensive line right now without Powers at guard and who will step in there. The offensive line can get really bad in a hurry with one injury, as we've seen with Ronnie Stanley's problems. So there are no guarantees in terms of what's going to happen, and you're gambling a lot when you spend a lot of money on a 1-year rental like Odell.
And I'm ready to talk about that. You have a lot of opinions. I want to get to those for sure. One more Hopkins question though. If he was cut, you talk about price. I feel like Hopkins wouldn't get the 19 million base salary he has right now. Would that be an easier pill for you to swallow if he was cut and the Ravens sign him?
Yeah, there's no draft capital involved. It's done at the market value. It obviously depends on the price, but at least there's no draft capital involved. So yeah, I think that could be something that would make sense. Now, does it make sense to buy another wide receiver on either a 1-year deal or a short-term deal or something that has a lot of concentrated money in the early years of the deal? I'm not convinced that that's the case. And so we'd have to see what the actual market was for him. But it's always better when you don't have to trade a draft pick.
Right. And obviously Baltimore's signed 2 veterans already in Nelson Aguilar and Odell. So if you make that 3, what does the room look like? Well, we'll potentially see, there's been all those rumblings with Hopkins, but the actual signing that did happen was Odell. We'll talk about him in the second segment, Ken's opinions on that signing, also Lamar and what the Jalen Hurts deal does for him and the Ravens. So be sure to stay tuned. So lots to dive into on Locked On Ravens. But first, something exciting is coming at Built.com on April 22nd. I don't have all the details yet, but the excitement is real and it's something you won't want to miss. If you know how Built works, they have the most incredible protein bars in the world, and they do these amazing flavor drops with unreal flavors and limited quality. So mark your calendars and head to Built.com on Saturday, April 22nd to be one of the first to discover what all the hype is about. I personally can't wait to see what the new flavor is, so make sure to use promo code LOCKEDON15 and you'll get 15% off your order. We're back. Our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allstreicher still here with Ken McKusick of Film Study Ravens here. And Ken, you kind of prefaced it in the first segment about your opinions on the Odell signing. You said you did not like that deal. Obviously, again, 1 year up to 18 million, 15 guaranteed. You mentioned the void years too. And you made a good point where the Ravens have not historically done that. This is pretty much new for them, especially because if he's not on the roster next year, it's an $11 million cap hit that is there for him.
At a minimum.
To extend them. Yep, exactly. So, for this deal, Ken, I mean, were you like when you first saw it come across your screen, were you shocked at the structure?
Yes. Furious, shocked. Yes. All those things. It's 5.8% potentially of the 2024 cap that they will spend on this deal. And they're spending less this year, but I don't think you can justify Odell in any way based on how good a player he was 2 years ago, which is not very, coming to Baltimore now. And, the one argument I can see for it is that the last time he played, he was playing through not having an Achilles or not having ACL. And so, he would have been better if he'd been fully healthy. He's still taking a big chance on a player who's been out of the league for a year, who wasn't good the last time. And I don't know what his true level of play is. And I didn't know with Des Bryant either, but unfortunately we found out.
Yeah. And Des Bryant and Odell, and the Sammy Watkins and the Michael Crabtrees and the Jeremy Macklins. Now there are 2 very different, I think, groups of veteran acquisitions the Ravens have made. It's the Derek Masons, the Anquan Boldens, the Steve Smiths, and then everybody else. It's everybody else in that category. It seems to me like you feel like Odell might end up more on the side of the latter, not the Mason group. Is that fair to say? Yep,
that's fair to say. I mean, first of all, he's a 1-year rental. There's no reason why he's in Baltimore for more than that. So he's not going to be Derek Mason. Derek Mason's a longtime Raven and contributed to top teams here. And Steve Smith got injured, but had, I think, 2 complete seasons pretty much with Baltimore. And Anquan Bolden, let's see, 10, 11, and 12 was a solid contributor. So we wouldn't be getting that with Odell. Odell is a one and done.
And I feel like, if it is the one and done, obviously you have to take on that $11 million at least cap hit at the end of the day there, where you can't just make what was it, like 2.7 per year for the next 4 years, 2.6 for the next 4 years. You have to put that all in that deal. Right. Now, for the void years, do you feel like now that the Ravens have done it with Odell, they'll do it with other people, or do you really just hope it's this and they're done?
I mean, it's what it really amounts to is they're spending future dollars every deal they make of this type. I'd like it to stop. I don't think that they have any more. They can probably point to themselves as making a big push forward with one more trade, but I don't want to see more money spent of future cap on this team right now, and I definitely don't want to see it until Lamar is signed. If Lamar was signed, I might feel differently about it. But he's, it's not done yet. We don't even know if he'll show up for the season. I've heard some people say that the signing of Odell was tied to the fact that the Ravens thought that's what had to be done in order to get him to even show up before week 11. If that's the case, that's a bigger problem. And, obviously I really have nothing to say bad about Lamar Jackson personally in the situation. I think he's got a legitimate work ethic. I think basically Harbaugh's commentary about injuries got him in trouble at the end of last year with the fan base a little bit in terms of what was going on. I do wish he'd have come to Cincinnati for the game, but he had an explanation for that. I just think he probably needs some better advice, and it's some guys with some very different objectives who are currently advising him in terms of his future, and I don't think it's in his best interest. And just the fact that he got a better offer and wouldn't have had to pay 3% of it, that doesn't matter unless he signs it. So you can't point to that and say he did a great job. Why would he need an agent? We can do that. Well, all the other stuff is why.
It's the offers he gets. It's not the offer he signed. So I mean, your point there.
It's the offer he signs, not the offer he gets.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like with Lamar, and you're saying, well, you have to sign XYZ to bring Lamar in. Lamar deserves a much better cast of weapons than he's had over previous years in the wide receiver room. There's no doubt about that in my mind. Odell, I think, provides them some, if he's able to return to some semblance of a form. He's not going to be anywhere near the New York Odell. He hasn't been nowhere near that for a while. But realistically, Ken, what do you think Odell can do for this offense, and what do you think he can bring to it?
He's a veteran leadership guy. I guess hopefully he'll be a positive influence on the clubhouse and not a media distraction. So I'd start with that. I think he can give you two levels of production, meaning he's not really a vertical threat. He's a guy who is a hitch route and an intermediate route runner, but he's not going to be anybody who's going to beat the corner down the field with any frequency that he really helps you there. So it really leaves the Ravens needing a speed threat to take the top off the defense for both the tight ends and for Odell. He'll be a one thing that would be good is he'll be additional go-to target for Lamar. So it's not just Andrews, and Andrews has really suffered in terms of productivity the last couple of years with bad targets on the margin. And it's included a bunch of intercepted balls and whatnot. So you want to see not that kind of concentration into one bailout guy if you can help it. So having Odell would help with that. But then he also kind of overlaps with the tight end group where a lot of the Ravens' talent is on offense. They have three tight ends who can certifiably catch the ball, and they look like there could be legitimate receiving threats in 23 as well. And it's a problem that they have overlapping needs on the field with Odell in terms of being a over the middle between level 2 and level 3 players that will rely on play action. And also if the Ravens have Odell on the field, that limits some of the things you can do formationally in terms of how often you go to 13 personnel or 12 personnel. So I know there's a lot of people who just love wide receiver talent. The Ravens offense has been really good with tight end talent and running backs. It was historically good in 2019 with a bunch of crap receivers. So, I don't think you worry about that too much. I think you realize Lamar Jackson helps everybody. All boats rise because of him. Actually, I think wide receivers actually rise less because of him than the other skill position players.
Yeah, and I know the transition now from Greg Roman in that offense to Todd Monken and what he can do, the connection between Monken and Beckham is obviously there as well. But I've also seen it. I want to get your opinion on this, Ken. Do you feel like Beckham and his skill set overlaps with Rashad Bateman and what he brings?
No, I think Bateman gives you more as a vertical threat and more of a complete route tree runner, and particularly with the speed he provides, he gives you more. Beckham might have a few less drops. He might be a little more reliable. You can point to certain things like that, but Bateman is head and shoulders above him as a receiver at this point in terms of what I would predict for this coming season, for example.
Right. Hopefully both have health go their way and are able to put together a full season there. But back to Lamar, Ken, obviously Jalen Hurts signed the deal with the Eagles a couple days ago, gets, 180 million guaranteed. Well, practical. He has the 110 at signing. Do you feel like, obviously, average annual value, I think that's going to continue to go up as the salary cap goes up and the deals continue to rise. People will continue breaking that threshold, but we've now had, Ken, almost pretty much 10 quarterbacks sign deals since Deshaun Watson got his. None of the guaranteed money's come even close. I mean, I mentioned the guaranteed at signing. Russell Wilson's the second highest paid in that aspect. It's 106 million less than Deshaun Watson got with his 230. I mean, does this deal, do you feel like this deal helps the Ravens in their argument? Did it help Lamar? Did it hurt either side? What was kind of your reaction?
Yeah, it being not a fully guaranteed deal or not even close to it definitely helps the Ravens in negotiations, I would think. Now, it may not help the Ravens because Lamar seems to be on an island about this. And so hopefully he'll get good advice at some point, which won't be slanted towards the NFLPA wanting to generally get more guaranteed contracts. This brings up an interesting point because what the NFLPA wants out of this is not entirely clear to me how they're benefiting their constituency unless they're trying to, in the end, get one more thing from the new CBA. And the basis is this, that if I'm a left tackle or a guard, journeyman, workman-like veteran guard in the NFL, I'm supposed to be part of the NFLPA's constituency. I'm not benefited at all from the fact that Lamar Jackson or quarterbacks in general get fully guaranteed contracts. That will not trickle down to me in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, additional money for top quarterbacks only takes away from the pool of money that can go to me because that pool of money is completely restricted by revenue sharing. What I think the NFLPA is trying to do, because nothing else makes sense, is to try and get guaranteed contracts to have a forgiveness component towards the cap and divide ownership on that basis, and basically say that each team can spend $10 million towards their quarterback because we really don't want fans deprived of their quarterback. That doesn't count against the cap. What that effectively does is change the revenue sharing percentage. So it might change it by 2 or 3 or 4%. At 5 million, it's 2%. At 10 million, it would be 4% of additional revenue sharing going for the players. It should be obvious that the owners are never going to go for that. Revenue sharing at the heart is the basis of what's done. I cannot figure out another reason why the NFLPA wants fully guaranteed contracts that makes any sense with relation to serving their entire constituency across the field. So when I see Demaryius Smith put out that long, damage control statement that he was putting out about, basically the Lamar situation, I searched for any credible way in which the NFLPA is helping their constituency with it, and I can't find one. So it's got to be a secret, like what I'm talking about, where they're going to have some forgiven dollars against the cap going to quarterbacks, because otherwise it makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, and I know there's been the NFLPA has drawn a lot of ire over the course of these last couple of months in terms of, the advice that they are allegedly giving Lamar and how that has gone on, because obviously Lamar has his team. He's being advised by the NFLPA, and, in the best interest of the players is what the NFLPA is supposed to be for. So to be able to get something for the players out of this, to start a trend of these fully guaranteed contracts, I think is what they want out of this.
And that's not it. I mean, if that is what they wanted, they can't go about it in a revenue sharing environment because they're just taking from one set of their constituency to go into the other. So that's where it just doesn't work for me. And it's the whole notion of guaranteed contracts should be something that's handled by the NFLPA through an insurance company. So go to an insurance company, and this is the perfect opportunity to be. It could be a hedge fund, or it could be a large insurance company that does disability income, could do it and say, look, I want my contract guaranteed for 250 million full instead of the 180 million full they're going to get. And they'll look at it, and they'll look at the structure of the contract. They'll say that additional 70 million will cost you 23 million to have fully guaranteed. Well, you've done a good thing for two reasons for your player. First of all, you framed up what the true value of that contract is. It's 23 million less than what the ownership group has really offered you. And second of all, you've allowed him to use that in negotiations with the team. And if he's risk averse enough to want the deal, great. You've given him yet another service. So it's something the NFLPA should be handling, but it shouldn't be a backdoor method to try and work around the current method of revenue sharing. I don't think that's going to work. NFLPA is fully within the rights to go for a higher percentage of revenue sharing, of course, and they should try and negotiate for more on behalf of the players every time the CBA comes up. But it's the in-between stuff where they're trying to backdoor, and in this case, they're not serving Lamar Jackson. They're serving the entire NFLPA, or they think they are. And Lamar Jackson really needs somebody who's on Lamar Jackson's side.
Right. A lot of people want this situation to be going for both parties, but Lamar in particular, I mean, he's someone who is very dug in his stance, and hopefully some resolution will come, but the NFLPA, I do agree, has to be working a bit more. And if they're advising Lamar, that has to be for Lamar and not for the greater benefit.
It can't be. How can you? They have conflict of interest right away. I mean, they're representing this huge constituency of 1,700 players or whatever it is, all the players in the NFL. They can't advise Lamar and not hurt the rest of the constituency if they get Lamar more money. So it has to be Lamar's agent.
And this is it's so unique. Have we seen a situation like this where it's been, obviously Lamar doesn't have an agent, and that's pretty rare in itself, but it just feels so unique that the NFLPA is taking this stance with Lamar in this situation.
I can't recall when it's happened before. If somebody who knows more about the history of it might be able to pick one, but yeah, I can't remember one either.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's been a lot. It's been an ongoing situation that many just hope will end at some point. But we'll continue to talk about Lamar a bit in the final segment. Also getting the draft talk with Ken here, so be sure to stay tuned for our final segment coming up on Locked On Ravens. We're back rounding out Locked On Ravens here on Thursday, April 20th. Kevin Ostreicher is still here with Ken McKusick. And Ken, the one thing I want to continue over from our second segment talk about Lamar is the fact that with Hurts signing his deal, there's been a lot of conversation about, will Lamar suit up for Baltimore? Will he be on a long-term extension, the franchise tag? Do you feel like Lamar's just kind of waiting out this next group, like waiting out Hurts and Burrow and Herbert and even Trevor Lawrence to see if one of those guys will come close? Or do you feel like he's just so dug in on what he believes he's worth from this, I guess we couldn't call it advice from the NFLPA?
I really can't speculate on that. I don't know where Lamar is. It's in some ways the motives of the NFLPA are more transparent. Lamar, he thinks he's worth A, and a bunch of other contracts have been said signed around the rest of the league that would say his value is B. And we had the same thing occur with Joe Flacco. It wasn't really any different. Joe bet on himself. He kept stringing it out, and he eventually got paid really well for the Super Bowl run. So it did work out for him, and it might work out for Lamar. I want Lamar to be. The next time Lamar steps on the field for the Baltimore Ravens, I want him to be a very happy quarterback who is in a good space. And that's why I really want the money just spent on him. And one thing I would say about Lamar is that he doesn't really need as great players around him to make his offense great. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense to go out and sign veteran receivers. I know he thinks it'll make all the difference in the world, but he makes everybody better just by being that enormous additional 11th man threat that he has been since he came to the Ravens. So I hope that, the next time he steps on the field, he realizes how much the Ravens fans and the Ravens organization, still loves him and wants him to play well here in Baltimore.
Right. I think the lot that is lost in this situation, it's become very two-sided where it feels like people are either all on the Ravens side or all on Lamar's side. I think people are rooting for Lamar. I'm rooting for Lamar. It's very obvious, Ken, you're rooting for Lamar too. And I think, back in 2019 when they were dancing on the field and having all that fun together, it just didn't feel like that last year, especially towards the end where it just felt like something was off. Obviously the injury happened. So with Lamar, when he's happy and on the field, he's a better quarterback. The vibes are better, and vibes are important. I think they're underrated. Vibes are important. Lamar brings a good vibe, but I agree with you. I definitely want him to be happy the next time he steps on that field. But let's move into the draft. 22nd overall pick here, Ken. 5 picks, and I put it out on Twitter. The Ravens, 5 total picks this year. They had 6 in the 4th round last year, so this is very unconventional. I think both the last 2 draft classes, 5 picks would be half of what they had. I think it was 10 2 years ago and 11 last year. So I think 21 picks in the past 2 years. With 22, obviously, I think Odell pigeonholes them less into a wide receiver in round 1. I think the needs are very obvious. Corner, wide receiver, edge is a very underrated, but I think a need still. What would you do there? If the Ravens have to stick and pick, would it be a corner for you, or would you still take a wide receiver?
I think they are more likely, and I'd be more happy if they take a corner number one instead of a wide receiver. And I know that's going to take a lot of flack there in itself, but it's about 75% of their total draft capital is in that number 22 pick. So let's talk about overall draft strategy first. If they don't trade down out of number one, no other trade downs really matter. I mean, it's because all their value is in that 22nd pick. So they've got obviously several options at number 22. I think it'd be good, but the guy I really love at corner, who I think will be available. Some people have him a little later, and it's possible they could even trade down for this guy, is Emmanuel Forbes of Mississippi State. He is the ball hawk at corner. Unbelievable. Marcus Peters-like skills, holds the NCAA record now with 6 interceptions returned for touchdowns among 14 total interceptions. Patient spider, back end cover 3 player. One of the things about him is he weighed like 166 pounds at the combine. So he's very, very thin and wiry. Actually, another thing he's got that's very similar to Peters in terms of being a very undersized player. But if you watch his tape, I mean, he hits like a truck. He really comes up. In particular, is extremely good instincts. It's more difficult to tell when he's baiting the quarterback, but there have been cases where he's definitely doing that in college. And the other thing I really love about him is that there's not one particular type of pick that he has to get. So he had picks in all sorts of different coverage things. He had picks off tips. He had picks when he was underneath in zone. He had picks when he was over the top, looking like he was playing safety. And he had plenty of picks where he undercut the route. So really exciting in terms of what he brings to the field. Christian Gonzalez is a player that I would not like at 22. And I know a lot of people want him higher. Great. If he's gone first, fantastic as far as I'm concerned. In the Gonzalez-Witherspoon debate, you put me firmly in the Witherspoon camp for the first overall cornerback picked. He has, in addition to just looking very good on tape, he has tremendous statistics for yards per target in college. And I got to go to this because this is one of the numbers that really jumps off the page. So Witherspoon was at, oh, come on now. It was like 2.5 or 2.9 yards per target this last year with Illinois, and Gonzalez was 8.8. So if you look at those two, you can over savant yourself into a position where you say, well, I really love Gonzalez's size, and look, he's got the ability to press outside. And I think back to the scouts in the room at Moneyball talking about how the ball just jumps off his bat. Just look at the guy's results here, and you see a great player. The guy last year, by the way, who the Ravens apparently didn't really like, Trent McDuffie, was last year's guy who had fantastic yards per target in college, and in the NFL, he had a great rookie year, and won the Super Bowl in his first year, not by himself, obviously. He's right. The Chiefs, but yeah, I hope that both Witherspoon and Gonzalez are gone, and the guy I would take third it's not Porter, it would be Emmanuel Forbes.
Yeah, and people do point to Porter Jr. or Deonte Banks or a Cam Smith, for example. I think Forbes has pushed himself into at least late first round, if not early second, is like his floor. But I think as a ceiling, he could go right around like 21, 22, 23, because he does have those instincts. And with the Marcus Peters situation being very almost eerily quiet. I don't know, he didn't, the year he had off the injury, it wasn't realistic. Every single player they had coming off an injury would have a great year. Stanley did, Dobbins did. I think Edwards looked good. Peters was the guy who didn't really look that good. To me, I'm with you. I'm in the corner group. If the Ravens stick and pick, I think this is a very deep corner class where you could make the argument that, well, if they pick a wide receiver at 22 and they have a guy at 86 fall to them, there are guys who could fall to them at 86 in that class, but Forbes is not going to be one of those guys. Porter's not going to be Banks, all those guys, they're going to be gone. So you're maybe looking more at the Travius Hodges-Tomlinsons, who I know people are concerned about his size a little bit. Where does he profile in? So it's really interesting. But Ken, then you mentioned the trade down, and I agree. A trade down from 86 does not a lot at all for them. It would have to be, if you want to pick up the pipe dreams, maybe like 30 and 62 from the Eagles. I don't know if they do that, probably not. But getting a late first and a second, or an early second and another second, I think that the cream of the crop of this class is like late first to mid third. Like, you're going to find a lot of people in that area where if the Ravens have 6 or 7 guys that they like at 22, I mean, you can trade down and still have probably 2 or 3 of those guys on your board. So do you feel like, we talked about corner, but do you feel like they could trade down and still get a corner they really, really like if it's 29, 30, or even in the early second?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of guys. One name you didn't mention is Keely Ringo of Georgia. He's fantastic. Yeah, those guys, Banks, Porter, and Ringo, I'd all put them pretty close. In Porter, Ringo, Banks would be my order of those three, and they're 4, 5, and 6 on my list. So I'd be happy with any of those if the Ravens traded down and got one. But Forbes is the guy I really want. Forbes is the guy that is a special, potential, very high ceiling difference maker in this class. And any of those guys could be good, but I think Forbes just has the best chance to become Marcus Peters of the guys in this class.
Do you think the Ravens could trade down and still get Forbes if it's like 28 or 29? Or do you think he'll be gone by then?
I don't know. There's always a lot of inefficiency on draft night that's unprojected. So if we see all 4 quarterbacks go, we see more offensive tackles go, we see Bijan Robinson go. That would be a good one to go before there. And we see there's a lot of edge prospects, and I don't exactly know how the edges are going to come off the board because there's a lot of very minimally incremented differences in talent among the edges that might cause a general shift downwards of those picks. So I would think that, it's conceivable Forbes lasts into the early 30s, but I would probably bet against it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see a run. It's almost like the wide receiver run we saw at the very end of the top 10 last year, where there are so many of those like maybe mid-teens to late 20s corner prospects. You could see a huge run on those, and I would not be shocked if Baltimore was one of those teams. But finally, Ken, would you be mad if they took a wide receiver at 22, like Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnston, or any of those guys off your board completely?
My top guys are Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison, and Zay Flowers. Those are number 1, 2, 3. JSN's number 4. I would not be real thrilled about getting JSN at 22. The other 3, I could live with any of them. If that's what the Ravens really believe they need, if that fits into their thinking about Lamar, if that helps them with Lamar in terms of getting that deal done, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Does kind of limit the Ravens. Now, the Ravens aren't in need of just one cornerback. They really need a couple they need a couple on the outside period, whether that's Peters and somebody they draft later, or potentially re-signing maybe a Peters or drafting a cornerback. They still might want a slot cornerback backup because right now they've got Hamilton there who's terrific. I just think they probably want to move him to the back end on this coming year, or at least be a slot safety.
Right, yeah, and with Chuck Clark not being there anymore, I'm sure they want more of a much better, not better. I think Hamilton was really good in what he did last year, but a different role for him. And I think, for Baltimore, wide receiver at 22 wouldn't be the end of the world, but you mentioned the corner room. I mean, the Ravens love those 3 corner groups. I mean, they love, back in the day, I say back in the day, like it was so long ago, but Marlon Humphrey, Jimmy Smith, and Brandon Carr, or Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters and Jimmy Smith, those 3 really, really good corner rotations. If you can have Humphrey, you re-sign a guy like Peters, or even get a Rocky SC and someone who they brought in for a visit. And then they draft someone like a Forbes or a Porter or a Banks or a Ringo or someone in the first round. I think that gives you that. So I'm on team. I think if I had to give like a list of 3 in terms of order, if they have a good corner at 22, I say just take them there. Unless you have a good trade down option, then that's my number 2. Then if it's not that, a wide receiver would be fine. I'm not opposed to it, but I think corner's definitely my number 1 that I do there at 22. But Ken, I appreciate you. That's all I have for you here today. Thank you for hopping on and giving your opinions. I always appreciate it. Please tell people where they can find you and what you've been working on.
All right. Thanks for having me, Kevin. I'm at Film Study Ravens on Twitter. We'll be doing a live stream on draft night. Want to encourage people to come and join us for that. It's just a lot of fun to watch the draft. We have a good panel. Jason Smith will Huddle It Up Films is with us, and we'll be having a lot of other people. Kevin, you're welcome to join us if you'd like to. It's a lot of back and forth, a lot of ability to ask questions on draft night, a lot of very real emotion coming out about the picks as they happen. And we're completely Ravens centric. So if every pick, it's how does this affect the Baltimore Ravens is the thing that's on our mind. We don't really care, about a quarterback taken by another team and then what he had for breakfast that day, which is a lot of what NFL draft night ends up being on TV. So it's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, and be sure to check that out. I'm sure Ken will have more information on that. Be sure to follow him on Twitter so you're able to get that information and check his workout. It's really great. He's doing content on the daily still, right? Daily content from you. So you stay him here on Locked On Ravens. He's one of the many great Ravens people who puts out that content. So the links to his work will be in the description below. But Ken, I appreciate you. Thank you again. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here tomorrow, rounding out the week, more Ravens content. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll see you right back.